the Alabama Crimson Tide preview video, Chris. We'll start us off here. We're talking about the Alabama's offense, right? And if you don't know, apparently we don't give a piss about nothing but the Tide. Ooh. So we'll see how that goes, right? Kind of felt weird saying that, but hey, whatever it is, what it is. Look, losing the GOAT Nick Saban's going to hurt the Tide, right? Getting a guy like Kalen DeBoer in is going to help the Tide keep rolling, right? At least that's what Alabama fans are saying. So, hey, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt because Alabama has been the gold standard in the SEC for a while. Now, Bama's offense last year, Chris, I thought, sputtered at times, and then at other times they outperformed the expectations. We talk about this all the time. Bama's offense kind of was like a roller coaster. Started off pretty good, hit Texas and USF, and I thought they were, kind of inconsistent. And then after that, they bam, shot out of a cannon from there, and then kind of kept doing that stuff. So, it's just really hard to kind of pin that down. I thought last year that was all due a lot to the offensive line struggling at times. Milroe, he was a little inconsistent, like in the passing game, from week to week. But DeBoer should make an immediate impact on the offense, I believe, as far as that's concerned. Looking at Jalen Milroe, right at the quarterback position, he did put up 3,300 yards and 35 total touchdowns last year. And that's all while missing that game against USF, right? So that's still pretty good, I think, for Milroe. I thought he really, shocked me with how well he did last year. Again, and it's not like those are slouch numbers. It's just I thought he wasn't going to be as good as what he was. Again, you can say that and still say, hey, he did have some performances, where he was a little inconsistent. It didn't help with the offensive line and receivers dropping passes and things of that nature, right? So I thought the running back room, they did lose, both their leading rushers from last year in McClellan and Williams, but Jam Miller and Justice Haynes are more than capable of leading the way for Alabama. Look, Alabama is not devoid of talent on either side of the football. I think they're going to be okay. It's just a matter of can these guys get up to the standard that Alabama has set and what Kalen DeBoer wants in year one. They did lose their top three receiving threats from last year as well, but they get Jeremy Bernard from Washington and Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law. They are both uber talented as well. Speaking of talent, let's not forget about five-star true freshman Ryan Williams stepping up, and I think he can make a play or two for this team this year. O-line, I think, should be, good this year. At least I don't believe, Parker Brailsforth is going to struggle to get the ball to Milroe like we saw on an epic level last year in the semifinals against Michigan. Chris, with that being said, I want to throw it over. Talk to me a little bit about that Crimson Tide defense.
Yeah, last year, he only gave up 19 points per game. That was 16th in the country, so pretty damn good there. They had 36 sacks, which was 10th in the country, so they got to the quarterback at a pretty high clip last year. But this year, a lot of turnover, even on the coaching staff. They bring in new defensive coordinator Kane Womack. He worked with DeBoer at Indiana a few years ago, so he's coming over. They got some chemistry there. Now, Bama, as I said, man, they had a lot of turnover this offseason with the new coaching staff and all that. They do retain, though, defensive lineman Tim Keenan, linebackers Deontay Lawson, Jihad Campbell, and safety Malachi Moore. Moore is going to be one of the top safeties in the country this year. He's really, really, really good. The Tide, though, will look to replace both star pass rushers and cornerbacks that they lost in the NFL draft, though, too. So they had some guys taken in the first couple rounds. This is kind of the crazy thing here, and I want to talk about this for a second. Nick Saban was a defensive-minded guy, obviously, his whole life. And, 17 years he was at Bama. He always had a top 10 defense. I think there was like 1 or 2 years in there that they didn't. DeBoer is an offensive-minded coach. You know what I mean? We've talked about him a ton this offseason. So how will the Tide look in 2024? I'm really interested to see how this plays out with Bama because we've kind of known Bama for looking a certain way for so many years now. So, Chris, if you wouldn't mind, pull up the schedule here, and I'll give you my prediction on the Alabama Crimson Tide. Vegas has them at 9.5 wins. Now, I know you can't win 9.5 games, but I have them going 10-2. And I looked at this schedule a ton and broke this down several different times, and I decided to go with 10-2. And you better win against Western Kentucky, South Florida. That game at Wisconsin early in the year, I think, will be very interesting for both teams. Wisconsin under Luke Fickell's second year, I think this will be a good game. I do. I think it's going to be close for a little bit. I just think overall, I know it's on the road. I get that. I'm leaning Alabama here strictly because Alabama's just got more talent across the board on both sides of the ball. I mean, that's the only reason why. I think Wisconsin's going to be a good football team this year, a better one. But give me Bama there. Then you got the Georgia game. We talked about this a little bit ago. I'm leaning Georgia, and I think Georgia kicks the shit out of Alabama. And I hate to say that. It's nothing against the Crimson Tide. I just think with Saban being gone, Kirby doesn't have to, worry about being 1-5 anymore against Bama. I think it's going to change here a little bit, and I think Georgia's just the better team across the board. At Vandy, you better win that one. You got South Carolina, and I think this game is a trap game for coming up here against Tennessee. I took Tennessee in this game. I'm pretty high on Tennessee. Normally, that's not the case. I think this year Tennessee is going to be a pretty good program. The only reason why I'm leaning Tennessee in this one is because it's on the road. Mizzou, I have Alabama winning this game against a good Missouri team who we're both very high on. At LSU, difficult place to play. Give me Bama in that one, though, too. And I think this game, like I said, it's a pretty tough 3-game stretch here. But I'm leaning Bama there. Mercer, better win that one. At Oklahoma, I could see this game being kind of tough with it just being on the road. But give me Bama. Iron Bowl, we talked about it. Fact that it's at Bryce Denny. Give me Bama in that one. 10-2 this year. They will find themselves in the college football playoff. Christian, what is your record prediction for Alabama this year?
So, I'm not too far off from you, Chris, here. I got them going 9-3. Like you said, I mean, I agree with you. The first 3 games they should win. I think the Wisconsin game, it's on the road. It's the first real test, 11 o'clock kick. I mean, we'll see, what happens there. It could be a pretty interesting game, but I think Bama will probably play around with them for a little bit. I think they'll pull away and end up, the final score is going to be a lot worse than what it probably actually was. So we'll see. Then Georgia, like we said, Saban has had Kirby Smart and just about all his assistants number for years to come. I think Georgia is going to come into that game with a chip on their shoulders, the 6:30 kick. I think this is going to be the changing of the guard a little bit, if you will, in the SEC in this particular game. So I like Georgia in that one. Vanderbilt, nope. South Carolina, nope. Then that 3-game stretch you talked about, Tennessee, Missouri, and LSU. All 3 of these games are very losable. I, again, have them losing to Tennessee. It's on the road. I think that's probably going to be the toughest game out of that slate. Heupel has beaten Alabama with Nick Saban at the helm. I don't know if we're saying Nick Saban's the GOAT, you know what I mean? You can't just say Kalen DeBoer, a guy who has not won a national title at the major FBS level, can just step in and just be the GOAT and continue that, right? I think Bama will take some steps forward on offense, but I think they're also going to maybe take some steps backwards on defense, which I think if you look at, how's that any different than Ole Miss? How's that any different than Tennessee? How's that any different than Oklahoma? How's it any different than Texas, Missouri? You get where the analogy of this is going. All these are really talented teams that we talk about. Bama has more talent than all those teams, I think. But the other side of that is when you talk about the way that a lot of these teams in the SEC are constructed, that leads to more shootouts. When you have more shootouts, we obviously know more crazy things can happen. You look at the year prior when Alabama lost to LSU and Tennessee in the same year, it was because they got pulled into a dogfight and their defense just got pushed around, right? So, yeah, I like Kane Womack, but again, the guy was at South Alabama. This is the SEC. This is a different beast. I understand he's got a lot of talent to work with, but we haven't seen it yet. So I'm going to be curious to see what happens there. So Tennessee, and then, my third loss, Chris, comes really shockingly somewhere between LSU, Oklahoma, or Auburn.
Okay.
Now, I know we just covered Auburn. I know we said, hey, Alabama's going to beat them. Auburn could go on the road and could pull something off late in the year, right? It's kind of like Georgia Tech in that it's a trap game. I don't know what the hell it is. It's one of those weird things where anything can happen in the Iron Bowl. At Oklahoma, again, if you get into a situation like last year where you saw Ole Miss and LSU play each other, Ole Miss pulled away late in that game. Oklahoma might do the same thing this year that Ole Miss was able to do to LSU last year. And then at LSU, Missouri and LSU, that's another interesting, 2 games there that I think aren't worth overlooking at all either. So I think on the surface, you look at this and you say it's business as normal for Alabama, but I do think, Alabama lost a shit ton of players. They lost over 40 different guys, almost 50 different guys to the transfer portal. So you're not just going to lose those guys, replace your coach and Nick Saban, and then expect it to be business as normal. There is going to be some growing pains, I do feel like, but it's not going to be like growing pains like Auburn or Florida or some of these other programs have experienced in years past, where you have a 5 and some odd season. You have a 4 some odd season. Like, it's not going to be like that. I just think it's, the floor for them is a little bit higher than most other programs. So, Chris, with that being said, kind of talk to me a little bit about that. What's the floor? What's the ceiling for Alabama?
This is tough. I'm going to add this before I throw the floor in here. We just don't know yet what DeBoer is going to be at Alabama and what he implements. Like, we know what he's done in the past. He wasn't at Washington that long. He turned them around, and they were very competitive. Great offensive teams over there. I would say the defense was suspect in his time there, and that's not knocking him. But he's also trying to replace a legend, which is impossible to do. I don't care who you are or what sport. Nick Saban's the greatest college football coach of all time. I don't even think it's close. I really don't. Do I expect DeBoer to fall off a cliff? No. I think Alabama's going to be very good. It's Alabama. They're always going to be able to recruit well. DeBoer's always done that. So we saw what he did with Michael Penix coming from Indiana. He turned him in. He could very easily won the Heisman last year. But just with what's in place at Bama and Jalen Milroe, that's where I'm getting to here offensively. Is he going to throw the ball a lot more with Milroe? Milroe struggles intermediate short routes. He does. He's got a rocket for an arm, throw it 80 yards, but that doesn't mean shit. He can run. I mean, he's like a running back playing back there. He can make plays, extend plays. What I think is, I guess what I'm getting to is with the floor, if things don't go as well, especially defensively too, and that's what we could always rely on Nick Saban, and I think he did his best coaching job ever last year with that team. I don't think they were that talented as far as offensively, and he turned that around. We saw that the first couple games. You talked about Texas, South Florida. Remember how close that game was in a monsoon? A lot of people were like, holy shit, this Bama team isn't that good, me included, and then they turned it around and end up damn near beating Michigan, who won the national title. So I think the floor, though, I would say 8 wins. I have a hard time seeing Alabama ever losing more than 8 games. That's just, I don't know if it's just because they've always won 10, 11, 12 every year. But as far as the ceiling goes, if things go well, and I think if that defense would happen to stay similar to what they've had, I could see 11-1 this year. I could. I know I said that I kind of took them on a stretch going 10-2. I wanted to say 9-3, but it's just so hard when I see the name Alabama to pick them to lose more than a couple of games. It's just hard to do. Me and you've been watching a lot of college football most of our lives. So, but I want to flip that around, Christian. What do you think the floor? What do you think the ceiling is for Alabama this season?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely agree with you. I think the floor for Alabama this year, 8 wins. Like you said, Chris, and for the same reasons that you said it. I think you go back and you look at Michael Penix Jr.'s rushing stats at Washington, and they were pretty non-existent, by the way. And so what Kalen DeBoer wants to do is, to me, where I think Bama might struggle this year is if they try to box in Jalen Milroe. Right now, obviously, we can sit here and we can 10,000 foot this to death, right, from looking above at it. I think Kalen DeBoer is a pretty smart guy. I don't think he's going to necessarily just put Milroe in a box and say, hey, I don't want you running the football. I want you to throw it and really develop as a passer. Because if he did that, right, and they struggle, that's going to be really challenging, right? So we're going to have to kind of see what they do there. Can they utilize him in the run game a little more and do certain things like that? I think that's going to be a really pivotal thing for them. The defense, right? I mean, hey, the defense does have talent, but they also lost so much, and they lose that Saban physicality. I mean, we watched it in the spring game, Chris. I understand it's a spring game. I know a lot of people talk shit about you cannot get anything out of a spring game. And I call bullshit on that, because every year you can say somebody had a really great spring game. Look at it. We got this 5-star over here. He did really great in the spring game, but you can't say, hey, our defense doesn't look as physical as they did. They look lost at times in the secondary. They look like they're getting blown off the ball. Every time Alabama ran the football, they got just, they got 5-7 yards. What do you think is going to happen when you play Georgia? What do you think is going to happen when you go on the road to play, Tennessee and Oklahoma? You think their receivers are just going to all of a sudden get locked down and clamped up? No. You lost 15 guys in the secondary, and you're going to sit there and tell me that Tennessee, Oklahoma, LSU, Missouri doesn't have capable guys that will make you look like you're lost in a phone booth? Hell no. Now that I've got that rant out of the way, let's get back into the ceiling here, right? Got a little fired up there, right? I'm going to calm down. Just calm down here. I agree with Chris. I think 11-12 wins, undefeated, even if I could say so, right? I like DeBoer. He's won everywhere he's been. I think he could, he's getting tossed the keys to a Ferrari basically, right? Now, the parents kind of came in and put a little bit of a governor in the fact that he lost a lot of coaches, he lost a lot of players to the transfer portal, but Alabama, it's still a Ferrari nonetheless. They put a governor on it, instead of doing 180 miles an hour, now the car can only go 150. So I think they're still going to be really good. I mean, could he beat Georgia and beat the rest of the SEC and continue doing what Saban did? Absolutely, he can, right? The same way that I can say, hey, he hasn't proven himself yet, so until he does, I'll reserve that judgment. I can also say on the same side of it, hey, he could come out and go undefeated in the regular season. There's nothing saying he can't. I mean, Alabama is still one of the most talented teams, I think, in the country. Even though they did lose a lot of talent, I still think they're one of the more talented teams in the country. I like DeBoer as a coach, and I can see what they're trying to build there.